afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday, December 1st. Where the heck did the year go, right? Just wait and give me one little second. It looks like we're doing the live, so I'm going to go ahead and end that real quick. We're live on the YouTubes and the LinkedIns and the Facebookers and all that fun stuff. So, yeah, Friday, December 1st. It's a little crazy to think, Christmas is only 24 days away, and then a whole new year. Crazy stuff. Hey, I'm Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Scorecard. I'm here with our good friend Jesse. The other Tim, he's not here this week, but that's all right. Hopefully we'll be able to fill in, and we have a really great guest with us, AJ. So, Jesse, say hello, my friend, and maybe we can hopefully not get some of that hissing noise in the background.
Yeah, I just we were just talking in the green room, and I completely switched out my workstation. I'm still having issues, so more to come on my technical problems. But that's not why we're here. Jesse Miller, founder of Power PSA Consulting. I help MSPs scale security programs and do it for profit. And I'm also happy to say that we are once again annoying Tim because we have a lopsided amount of boxes in the group today.
OCD, right? I need one more to split it. Wait. So, let's do this. No? Yes? Maybe? AJ, how are you? Take a second to introduce yourself, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is AJ. I'm the founder and managing director of a company I started called Syntax Security Solutions, where the mission is simple. We design and build video games that we use as information security training tools, coupled with information security consulting. So with game sessions, you can cover off some part of your consulting work that needs to get done in your security program, security training that's designed to make your security program accessible to your technology and non-technology business units, and a whole lot of fun and engaging effort in the meantime. So that's keeps things fun and interesting. That's easily one of the best parts of my job.
Awesome. And I heard security at least a half a dozen times. And hey, I kind of like this layout, right? It's like half of the Brady Bunch theme. So
there you go.
Yeah. I can't believe it's already December 1st. And I guess I could say this. I am the proud grandfather of my first granddaughter as of Thanksgiving Day. So I know we've kind of skirted around that for the last couple of weeks and last couple of months, but yes, baby Chloe came into the world on Thanksgiving Day. So we were very thankful to have her join our family, and we're looking forward to spoiling that. You know what I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to playing with all the toys at Christmas, right? like Black Friday, I'm filling up the Amazon cart. And my wife was like, "What are you doing?" all the bells, all the whistles. So yeah, anyways.
They're a lot noisier than when you were a kid. So
oh my goodness, certainly are.
Yeah, your kids will be thrilled of all the noise in the house.
Yes. Well, and that's the benefit of being a grandparent, is I can just send them home at night or something, right?
So wired on sugar while you're at it. That's the best part.
Yeah. I've got the Sour Patch Kids right here. So today's topic, I heard security thrown out at least a half a dozen times between the three of us in our intro. Something about gamifying it. What is that, right? What do we mean by that? And before we get into that, let's just talk about security awareness training as a whole, right? We know we're supposed to be doing it. A lot of MSPs do it. Their clients, I think some of the things that I see in it is it's like a checkbox exercise. Mm-hmm. Watch a little thing, answer a couple questions, wash, rinse, repeat. And our good friends Alex and West and Kyle over at Empath, we talk about this a lot. There's a difference between training, checking a box, and actual education, right? And that's, for at least my perspective, having worked for an educational company for 20 years, it needs to move beyond just a little, oh, did you watch the thing and click the question correctly? Okay. It just doesn't feel like where we need to be in our security awareness or SAT, security awareness training.
I think it's a good point, Tim. And everyone, you hear the term gamification thrown out for all sorts of different things. Oh, we need to gamify this. We need to gamify that. What does it really mean? So I think maybe, Tim, we start there. And AJ, can you define gamification for us? Maybe even broader than in regards to security training.
Yeah, the way that we take the approach that we take to gamification, it's less about using it as a way to incentivize behavior and less about just kind of getting people involved and more about presenting a topic that is historically difficult to present in a way that resonates with people overall. And so by using games and using gamification in our processes, the way that that gets done is we meet people where they're at. People want to learn, and it's about embracing that learning opportunity wherever we can get it. Because if you meet people in that capacity, they're more willing to engage with the process, and all of that engagement comes entirely on its own. So, in a broad sense, gamification is really just about presenting a topic that's historically maybe a little dry, maybe a little complicated, in a way that's familiar, while also bringing some of the logic and the creativity into the entire engagement.
So you're saying training doesn't have to be boring and listen to some talking head on some video yap yap like Charlie Brown at you, and then hopefully you guess the questions right.
Right, and you're exactly correct. And I think part of the reason, the way that this all resonated for me, I was actually, it's funny you mentioned you were in education. I was also teaching in a technical school, and that was where I learned how people learn, because it's important to understand how your audience actually learns these topics. And we in the security space, I think we have this we gravitate towards this conventional idea of, if we have the presentation and we simply talk through it and it's filled with do's and don'ts, that's going to be satisfactory. And the reality of the situation is it isn't, because it doesn't meet our intended audience where they are. We fail, I think, to understand where they are in the business and how that resonates with our security program, and then speaking to that well in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I love the concept of meeting them where they are, right, and relating it to who they are. Right. I don't feel like BEC, business compromise email, like, I mean, not to play it down, but like Johnny Janitor doesn't know what that means. Right. Paul PhD might, but like the terms and the words, like being able to meet them where they are in using vernacular and using analogies that they understand, I think is sort of the next iteration of security awareness training, right? I think that, our good friend Connor talks about human vulnerability management, right? Mm-hmm. Training that human, educating the vulnerabilities around humans, right? I mean, machines are going to do what machines are going to do, and they're going to do what we tell it to do, what humans tell it to do, right? And so,
for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, I want to ask a kind of a pointed question here, AJ, and it might take me a little bit to get there, so bear with me. But, I was watching, doing my scrolling. I don't know exactly on what platform it was, but there was a video of, all the slot jockeys at a casino showing it down the line. They're all just hitting the button really quick, and it was users taking end user security training, and I'm like, oh, it couldn't be more accurate, because I know I've been that person, right? And I'm a former CISO and someone who actually appreciates security, but sometimes when you know the material and you just want to get through it. So gamification is great, but I want to say that there's also a danger of falling into that same mode that I've seen, at least, and this is back years ago in the NOC for the MSP that I was working in. We started doing some gamification on ticket close times, right? So if you got a ticket closed, first call close and quickly enough, with a 5-star rating, you got a point, right? And so there was a leaderboard, and everyone started playing the leaderboard, and we were all, leadership was all super happy to see everyone's all excited about this. Well, ticket quality went way down, right? Because people were still playing the game. They were trying to win the game, but they were shortcutting it to get to the end of the game. So I want to hear from you about your approach and how to kind of structure that so that it's just not about winning the game, but it's actually about absorbing the material.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first step is really understanding where your audience is at. And I think, as much as I bring that up, it's something I've seen in the security business time and again. When you have information security training involved, it winds up being it's yet another thing in a series of things, right? Mm-hmm. So security awareness training suffers from what I call the captive audience problem, where if you're going to a show or a movie or see a live band, you have made the decision to go and participate in that activity, for better or for worse. So if the band stinks or the movie's no good, at least you get something from it and you made the choice to be there. Security awareness training, you don't have that. It's a thing in the business that has to get done because we look at it from a checkbox exercise. So businesses make it mandatory. And so a lot of members of the organization are just going to get through it, whatever they got to do to get through it. And if it's a game where I can push the buttons and I get the results that I need, and HR and my manager and the CISO stop sending me the emails, I'm going to push that button as often as I can. So it's about taking a step back from the kind of the conventional ways of training in a business. And let's look at it from a social aspect of learning, because there's a lot of psychology that's showing us that the social aspect of learning has immense value. It's part of the reason I think even with all of the abilities to learn independently, we still prefer to learn as a group. And let's take into account the way that we like to have fun. And when there's some comedy involved with things, when we make it fun and accessible, when the mechanics are easy to learn, but take some time to really hone in. And it's a topic that is topical. Information security in any business, people are interested. But again, you have to showcase the value that it brings. So as far as gamification goes, I think there's a really excellent opportunity for it within the auspices of training. But to get people to kind of do the work that needs to go into it, I think that's where it can fall a little bit flat. So we take an approach of, let's look at your security program for one of the game services. We look at your security program holistically. We build it into a custom instance of that game. Your whole team works through a simulated incident in this game. And then using your processes, your tooling, the skills that you have existing in your security program, it's all in the customized instance. You now get to see where your security program is at in a way that, again, still resonates with the non-tech business units. So when you bring in the social aspect, because everybody's encouraged to show up, play, attend, and contribute, you create this event. It's not another thing. It's now a work event. And because we're covering training, because the person you might have an email outstanding with is sitting in the same room, you now have, like kind of almost a license to ignore some of what's happening for the rest of the day. It takes it out of the work task mode and puts it more into I'm here to learn something different. I'm here to look at something different. And that's why it works really well as a Friday afternoon activity. People bring in lunch and they make it work in that way. But because it's designed to showcase something interesting and topical in a way that they understand, in a way that like some part of the security program gets covered off too, it's a lot easier for it to sell in the boardroom.
Yeah, I like that. So just some takeaways there, for our audiences, things they can do with their programs is, it sounds like you're kind of like pseudo tabletopping, right?
It is a tabletop experience. That's one of the game services. Yeah.
Okay. See that I think that's really interesting, right? Because like you said, you make the pressure's off because no one person is on the spot, right? And if anyone looks dumb, it's kind of like mea culpa, everyone laugh, and as a group we learn, and then people get exposed to, again, like you said, as a group you get exposed to different perspectives. Someone might say something that helps you anchor that concept, or any number of things like that. So I really appreciate that idea of making it a group activity and then also facilitating some fun to it and making it an event. So that's really cool. I like that.
But for each of the sessions, I was just wanting to add, there's a money component. So both game services, there's a financial incentive to either resolve it quickly, or in the case of the other service where we're causing the incidents, get through the process with as much money left intact as possible. Because there's a money component associated, it creates a little bit of, it grounds a lot of what we're talking about in something everybody understands in a business. A business serves one singular purpose: make money. Like that's the root of what it's trying to do. Right. So when you showcase how much an incident costs in labor, compliance, customer losses, asset downtime, everything like that at the end, before you even hang up the phone, they get a chance to see everything that went on to resolve the incident, albeit in a simulated fashion. And then to see it at the end with, that's my whole budget, or that's going to come out of somebody else's budget next year, and that might be mine. That really starts to get the rubber on the road with that. So because we add the money component to it, it just seems to resonate with everyone in the business.
So am I like envisioning like cyber monopoly, right? I want my hotels and I want the railroads, right? So I
Yeah.
I kind of like the concept of that. I want to pull back a couple of other pieces here that you mentioned earlier, right? So having been in an educational company, having worked closely with the Department of Education, like social emotional learning, right? That is big, right? What we do with our kids, right? My grandkids eventually, like, we have play dates. We put them in, early childhood education where they can learn and grow off each other, right? That learning doesn't stop just because I'm graduated college or high school or whatever, right? That part. And so that's one piece is I totally enjoy and like that concept of that social learning, right? Those group activities, right? Except for I don't want to be the last guy picked.
Hey,
right?
everybody's got to go last. That's fair.
Well,
Somebody's gotta
you
go
can
last.
go last.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the other part that I really like, and I just kind of lost my train of thought, was damn it, I lost the train of thought. I was on a roll.
Monopoly.
Yeah,
Monopoly.
well, you said there's three things, risk, revenue, reputation, regerts.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, compliance footprint, labor costs, all of those get factored in. So at the end, you get a pretty comprehensive view of what this incident would cost, especially because we wrap a relevant threat case around it that's applicable to your industry of operations.
I just remembered it, and I put it in chat so I could remember it. Right. So I am an auditory learner. I'm also a verbal processor, if you haven't guessed by now. And so, like when you the big you, not you personally, when I'm presented with like read this thing and take a test, I like freak out. But if somebody reads it to me and then asks me the questions, I can answer them I can comprehend it, I can pick it up fast, so a lot of what I see in training as opposed to education is like linear modality, right? Watch a video or listen to a video, answer some questions. And like that interactivity for those that are kinetic learners, right? Gone. Like there's just that like very flat, like we're not addressing how people actually learn, right? How adults actually learn. And that's been beyond security awareness training. That's been Mike's sort of biggest shtick in this whole space of IT is this is a flat thing and this is how we do it. And this is like, watch a video, answer a question. No, like I don't learn that way. And I would imagine there's a lot of people like myself that don't learn that way, that need the kinetic, that need to like touch and feel and click buttons.
Yeah. Yeah, and gamification can't solve all of our problems in the tech space. I'll be the first to stand up and say that at the risk of maybe talking myself out of some prospective opportunities. It can't solve all the problems because at some point, you can play a game that tells you about how process hollowing works in the context of attacking an organization, or how incident response works and whatever that is. But at some point, you still have to understand the tooling. You still have to understand the processes, the procedures, the components of the business. You still have to put kind of the non-gaming aspects to the work overall. But where it really shines is getting people interested in the topics. I mean, we've heard it all before, the user problem. You can't ever get the users on board with the security program. And the reality is we haven't given them an opportunity to engage with it in a way that is meaningful, right? So instead of trying to teach everybody how a command line works, let's put something together where you get some pieces where you understand how some of this might happen in broad strokes. And then maybe that stokes curiosity. It won't be across the board, but maybe it stokes curiosity in a couple of the non-tech parts of the business unit, and they start digging in and engaging with this a little bit further. We've succeeded in the mission of getting more people in a security space that demands more and more people to be a part of it.
Yeah. How do you guys, I'd like to hear you kind of your journey as you came to this concept of group learning and how that was going to work. I'd like to hear a little bit of the evolution of your thought process there. So maybe start from the beginning and run that.
Yeah. So at I guess we'll go a little bit ways back. Circa 2013, I finished up my Bachelor of Computer Information Systems at a local university here. which is half business, half IT. So you got a little bit of the systems, a little bit of the programming, actually a lot of programming. That's primarily how I spent my time, because it seemed to be all that was really around. And then, some of the business side of it. So how to operate in a business, the different components and everything that go into it. And then from there, I grew my career in network operations, security operations, various offensive security work that had come my way, some GRC work. I spent some time doing some PCI compliance and other related work. And then basically the where this all started to take hold was a problem that lived rent free in my head over about a 10-year span in my career. Was why have we in the security space made so little progress on what we all call the stupid user problem, right? Why do we all feel that that's a problem that can't be solved without actually kind of taking a really good crack at solving it? Like, what have we really done to do this? So that problem has always been there. It's constantly just, again, living rent free in my head. Come around to 2019, in September of 2019, I took a teaching job as an adjunct instructor at a local technology school here. So technical school where you go for, mechanics, plumbing, pipe fitting, and information security amongst a wide array of different skills. So very, very big institution that did a lot of that. And in the process of teaching students about information security, one, it not only made me a better practitioner because I had to understand the topics well enough to explain them, but I also found that, again, how people learn. And I had mature students fresh out of high school, and they all sort of fit into the bell curve of this is the way that people learn. It's all different. But if you can reach a lot of different components of how people learn, because, Tim, you mentioned it, there's a couple of ways that you like to learn. So it's not a single way. There's multiple opportunities there. It allowed me to get really creative with how to, present the lessons and demonstrate the concepts. So in January of 2020, so where I'm from in Canada, the sun sets at about 3:00, and I had a Friday evening class. I was teaching PCI and encryption, which no ill will in those general directions, but those are not the most enticing topics. And I had a class from 4 to 6 p.m. on Friday in a basement with poor cell reception, no windows, in the middle of winter, when you wake up in the dark, you go to school in the dark, you go home in the dark, you spend your whole life in the dark.
I call that Tuesday.
Yeah, it's Tuesday for all of us, right? But it's even harder when you have students who are like, well, happy hour is a thing at that time, and that's more interesting. I don't blame them. I also was more interested in happy hour. So and to really make things worse, I had about 3 months of time to teach this program, and I was just flying through the material. It was going so quick. And one of my students, hey, can we have a tabletop exercise? And in the PCI standard, you have to do at least one exercise annually. You have to test and validate your IR plan annually. So whatever that looks like is up to you, but you just have to prove that you did the work. So another student I didn't want the conventional, here's some PowerPoints and some injects, and we just work through it kind of piecemeal. I wanted it to be interesting. So a small handful of whiteboard markers, a lot of improvisational comedy. There's enough time and distance between my students and their educational journey. They all have jobs and they're doing amazing things. I can officially say a lot of it was made up as I went along, because I had the 6 main concepts I wanted to get through. But I also knew that, in the process of improvising, we could get a little bit silly, a little goofy about it. And the whole idea really came to a head when my C student, one of my C students in the class, was asking me questions that I would expect from the C-suite. And that's not to denigrate anyone in particular. This was a student who by and large wasn't interested in all of the material we were covering. He still showed up to class, was diligent and wonderful to have around. But he was asking me really interesting questions. There was a desire and a dedication to the material that I hadn't quite seen before, that I managed to elicit out of this game in, by all accounts, a 2-hour time slot. So then sort of fast forward to the following semester, I had the same class, different students, and we had a midterm that had to be done, but everything went remote. I mean, March 2020, everything shut down. So everything was gone remote. And now my mature students and even some of my other students, they were now time sharing their technology with their children, because their children had to go to elementary and middle school and everything else. So they had to dial into Zoom same. So I needed a midterm that I could deliver And I needed it to be practical, and I needed to be flexible to meet my students where they were at, because they couldn't log in and do a multiple choice test at the same time. So let's have an incident, right? But let's refine the process a little bit. At this time, I wasn't making up nearly as much of it as I went along. I had mechanics in place. I had like a company pre-made. I had a lot of that groundwork done because I'd spent some time refining the work and realizing the value of what I had. And instead of a conventional midterm, my students had to write an incident report. And to make it real, it was Thursday, we had the session. They had all of Thursday, all of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it had to be on my desk by Monday at 9 a.m. Otherwise, my auditors, were going to have an issue, right? So we kept it real. But with it, they got something that they could actually specify in their job interviews as, this is an incident report that I did. This is the work that went into it. This is what I learned from the process, and here's how it impacted the business. So it actually was beneficial in them going out and finding work on their own too. And then from there, it just became I wanted some automated handling for a lot of this, because I needed a purpose-built app so I could focus on the teaching and the presentation. I wanted a lot of flexibility in the process because I wanted this as a service. And so I needed a way to automate as much of the business as I possibly could. So I just set to work on building up as much automation as possible, making it so that the threat scenario was relevant to the business, keeping the freedom and the flexibility in the game so that if somebody accidentally came to the right conclusion, I could move the game forward or slow it down as I needed to in order to get to the outcomes that we needed. And then wrapping a business around it and putting that all together. And 3 years later, there's a well-refined incident response game that covers all of that. There's a new game, Fishing Expedition. I just launched that this year, where we cause the incidents now. A bit of a choose-your-own-adventure fishing extravaganza. And the Marketing Arcade, which is what I use as the marketing vehicle to showcase some of the games, or at least some of the style that I have in the process. So SecOps Chaos is the first iteration of that, a 2D side scroller where you play as an overworked security analyst, dodging emails, trying to preserve your mental capacity, and hopefully securing your weekend. But with games, you get a lot of real estate to tell a lot of story and cover a lot of ground in a very short period of time, because people bring their creative and their logic side of their thinking to it, and you get some really amazing results.
So let's pivot here for a second, and I appreciate that. That's really interesting, And I was just saying earlier, like, sounds a little bit like backdoors and breaches, right? And maybe more advanced, maybe in like it sounds a little bit. So our audience, our MSPs, can relate to backdoors and breaches. But I want to dial it back a little bit. I want to kind of think about, like, how do we bring this to our customer? How do we, as an MSP, hey, we're going to move beyond the typical checkbox security awareness training and bring in like some educational component, some like, as an MSP, there's no way I could walk into my client and be like, hey, we're doing a tabletop on incident response. And they'll be like, table incident, what? No. So, and I'm not saying, and it's not to downplay what you're doing. I think what you're doing is amazing. I think audience, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, it's like, how do I bring this, to the donut shop next door where I manage their 10 computers and their security and their stuff? Like, I'm going to walk in there and be like, hey, let's do an incident response. And they're going to be like, what are we, out of milk? Because that's an incident, right? So in their mind.
Yeah. Well, the way that I have brought this into the business is, fortunately, they've played the game either at a conference or they've known somebody, and the recommendation has definitely been a pretty warm handoff. So that piece is pretty simple. But yeah, that's a thought experiment that I run daily, especially with all of the businesses that I interact with. And I guess the question I would put back is, if it's a donut shop and there's 10 computers and their biggest concern is running out of milk and dough, is a conventional incident response plan appropriate for that business? Right? Is conventional incident response in general really a concern? If a computer goes down, what is that computer responsible for? Do we have resiliency in the measure? That's kind of those questions that I would have back to the MSP associated with it. But the reality of it is, if the business does have a lot of tech, and that specific machine is very important to the organization, and we do need to communicate the value of, them taking care of it as much as the MSP, we wrap a threat case around it of, this machine is now gone for whatever reason. It got phished, ransomware, drive-by downloads, whatever that scenario looks like relative to the business. And then when we build it into the scenario, this is the impact that it has to your business. You now have no ability to place orders to your customers.
Yeah.
So how does the business pivot and manage that? And that's where we start to flesh out the resiliency, the backup plans that they might have available, and understanding the importance of, okay, maybe we shouldn't use this computer for a Facebook machine. We'll buy another one and leave it for that. And it's about showcasing how that impact matters to them in the way that matters to them.
Yeah, I had a similar question to Tim, and I think it's funny because, being in managed services, we both kind of think the same way, and I'm just imagining this conversation, like exactly the IT manager sees this and says, hey, this is a great idea. We should be doing this. But there's it's, again, from a security perspective, we think it's awesome. This would be great. Everyone would learn something. But then you go to the department heads and you bring it up to them and they're like, wait, take my whole department on a Friday afternoon and stop productivity to do that? No, we're going to just keep doing the same old phishing exercises because those take 15 minutes out of their day once a quarter, right? We're not, this is we don't see the value. So how do we package this in a way that it's attractive to the business, and how does those conversations work, at least in your experience?
Yeah. Well, so the nature of the way the services are built is at the same time, you can cover off some other parts of your security program. So the discussion gets a lot easier, as in we have to validate this anyway. If we do it this way, then we've covered all of that ground. We can basically get 2 for 1 in a manner of speaking. That's one way that has worked historically.
No, and that's interesting. So I want to click in a little bit on that. So what other time savings would you give for personnel that are doing this that would cover other issues? That's a great point.
Yeah. So one of my favorites is the way that I built the incident response game, Incidents and Accidents, is it can also work like a gap assessment. So if an organization has no incident response plan, or they're exploring a security program, whether it's, we're building it from new, or we're hiring it out, or whatever we need to do, we start at the logical place where a security program shows up the most, and that's in incident response. All of the work that you've done in a security program should dovetail into making your incident response better. Full stop. That's just the way they're designed. So if an organization is exploring all of this, now we can put them in a fictionalized representation of their business. So we abstract them away from the actual organization. So instead of the real donut shop, it would be a fictionalized representation of that. With it would be some processes, skills, tooling, everything that would go into that program. And so now that entire business has an opportunity to see the value the security program brings when it's needed the most. So you get a chance to see it before it actually needs to be there. And it also helps you prioritize a little bit of investment. So these are the skills we have to have on an incident response team. Okay, this is what we can put towards training. This is the tooling we need to have. All right, we can start to explore some costs and opportunities, whether it's with outsourced vendors, whether we build it ourselves, whatever that looks like. It helps facilitate the conversation of where do we put our money in the security program. And that tends to get a lot more play in the boardroom, because if we're already evaluating those questions and we're already running up against where do we spend it, or how do we spend it, or are we even getting good value for that spend? Then it really turns into this, okay, well, we can answer those questions and we can show you what you need. And it's a way that makes sense. And in the same vein, even your marketing team is going to get something from the experience. Yeah. So that gets a lot easier.
So then going back to that same conversation is like, we're still asking let's take an organization of 300 people. So we're asking 300 people at some point, maybe it's in different pods, to take 4 hours out of their day, right? Yeah. That's 1,200 hours, right? Or I could look at it from a boardroom perspective and say, or I could pay a consultant to come in for 80 hours and do a risk assessment and tell me all that stuff too, which is less money. So I'm just playing the devil's advocate here.
Those are great questions,
right? So let's hear some of that, because I think this is good for MSPs to start thinking this way, right?
Yeah. So it's actually it's interesting that you bring up that specific. So I used to do risk assessments, and a lot of them where you sit down, you ask all the questions. When everybody's in a boardroom and they're in front of somebody who's even perceived as an auditor, just because you're not there to do an audit doesn't mean you're not auditing the business to some degree. So if you're an outsourced consultant and you're asking all these questions, there's an immediate, you can feel it. You can almost feel it right in your bones of what I'm getting is half the story, right? I'm not seeing everything. And I had a client where part of their submission process to get me to build their instance, they sent me some reports from consultants that said the infrastructure is low risk, everything's great, life's wonderful. One afternoon with me and the threat case that I envisioned that was very plausible within their business, and their CTO is going, we'd probably be close to shutting it down at this point. So a risk assessment and the conversations that go into them, they're guarded. But when you abstract people away from the business a little bit, you actually get the full story. So instead of the conventional tabletop answer of we would check the logs, because everybody would go check the logs, the game is built so that the check logs button can go really, really great or really, really poorly. And then the conversation becomes about, well, if you went search evil.star for the last 8 months across all of our log sources, and you cratered the database, how does the business deal with that in the context of your incident? And it's about showcasing the reality of the way things work. And again, drawing out the real answers that we get. And, you know, it's different. I've been in risk assessments where it's like, this is a considerable problem, and the management, yeah, okay, that's cool and whatever. And the conversations in game of, oh, so the whole thing's going to shut down. Like nobody's had so much fun talking about their business cratering as they have in one of these games. And it's because we've taken away the seriousness to some degree. It's not that we don't take it seriously. It's that we've gone, okay, we know some of this is here. Let's have a bit of a belly laugh at it. And then let's actually do something to fix it. And the decision-making process within the business gets a lot simpler at that point. Okay, we know this is an issue. It's time to assign an owner, and then it winds up in the risk register and it gets sorted. So it tends to be a little more effective than we would check the logs. Never mind that logging has been down for 8 months and nobody said anything. Let's put that in game. Turns out logging's been down for 8 months. How do we confront this now? Let's expose those things for what they are.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's not so much that the value prop is that, hey, we're getting more for less, but it's more that we're getting better data by making an investment in more spend, really. Like by spend, I mean pausing our people to do this, but we're getting better data, and we're getting a truer representation and better deep knowledge about where we have issues. And at the same time, checking boxes of this, and we've checked the box of gamification for security. Yeah. Okay.
And that's the last part that really, and you know, this, depending on the organization, this is either really important or goes over like a lead balloon, but I always bring it up. The human factor, right? The human factor of it. Because we're all, at the end of the day, a business is run by people. When an attacker breaches your systems, that's a person who, whether they're using automated tooling or not, they push the button, they decided to target you. When you pick up the phone and call your incident responders out of bed, that's a person that has to get up and do it. Everything in business is a people problem. It's a people situation. That's always the way it is. And so when we show up and say, let's give your people something interesting to do today, let's make it so that this is obviously corporate approved fun, but you know, they accidentally learn something in the process. It shows an investment in taking away some of the usual day-to-days. So the businesses that are like, yeah, I could get a consultant and they're just going to ask all the questions and we'll just do the 15-minute things here and there. In my experience, they're not necessarily interested in solving these problems. They want to sit back and admire them a little bit more. What they really want to do is, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say that's just a good segue into like this team building that Pat put out here, right? So, exactly, you know, team building exercises, right? It's one thing because, you know, companies get in this like the trust ones where people have to fall, or like the marketing ones where people have to do like, so there is a mindset of some level of business, right? And I'm not talking Bob's Donut with five staff, but some level of those larger, you know, mid-level clients that have that concept of team building. Right. They just don't do it in security. They do it in trust or marketing or core values or camaraderie or anything other than tech.
Right. Yeah. So what if we brought that approach to tech? And what if we did away with the kind of insipid, close your eyes and fall back and hopefully accounting catches you? Like, what if we just did away with all that? And we realized that so much of that is, I think it's a forced interaction, you know, and that's the human element of all of this, right? You know, when you put so many of these forced interactions, tabletops traditionally suffer from low engagement. Like we've all been in them and we've all sat and went, boy, I would have loved to have missed this, right? Like, this is tedious. And, you know, when I have people going, they're still talking about your session a year later, and someone found out we did a game and was upset they didn't get to come play, and we're on to something. I don't know anybody who's ever been upset they missed a tabletop exercise, but I run into that frequently because we put the human element all the way back into the business and we just lean right into it. That's the whole thing. So improv comedy, you know, like proper presentation styles, like keeping things fun, lighthearted, interesting, telling stories, making it accessible, making it available to people within the business. Yeah, you don't have any technology experience, go for it. And even from the onboarding piece for all of the services, everything that's done, it's designed for the most junior person in your security team to complete the work. Because if we aren't making security accessible, we're at a point where we're just going to run out of people willing to do the work. And we have this problem. This problem is global, where we need people to come in and do the work. We need the people in the business units to kind of be our eyes and ears in a lot of ways and work with us collaboratively. And so by showing up in a collaborative fashion in a way that's fun, interesting, and relevant to their business, that collaboration happens entirely on its own. I have no issues filling up a half a day. In fact, I usually run out of time. So
yeah,
that was a good problem to have.
That was a question I had. Is, I mean, I'm sure you know, having delivered so many of these, and I think, you know, I want to take this away from the actual platform and just to a more general tabletop or delivering some sort of group activity as a security consultant, like an MSP is doing that. What are some techniques that you could give advice to these consultants when they run into a really low engagement room, or maybe somebody who's being a stick in the mud and trying to throw a wrench in the works? What are some techniques you can share just pragmatically with the team?
Yeah. You know, it's kind of weird, but performance art. I have a history of performance art. I have been in plays. I got a song on the radio. I've done stand-up comedy for money. Being able to be affable in a boardroom goes a long way. And I think from a security standpoint, you know, historically we're used to being the weirdos who are going to take away your access to social media, right? And so I think there's some of that still in the business, and you know, we have to work to undo that a little bit. There is room for comedy in a boardroom. You can make jokes in a boardroom and do so in a way that is fun, interesting, and accessible. But presentation style in general, maybe if, you know, being a bit of a big fat loudmouth like me isn't your thing, you know, you get to a point where it's like you can still be engaging by telling a story that corresponds to the session you're trying, because we're storytellers under the hood after all, right? You know, if people have questions about a breach and you're aware of it, right? Like, yeah, hey, I read about that. If you can add some contribution to that story, if you can add a little bit of nuance, and bonus points if you can make demonstrations. Technology demonstrations might seem counterintuitive for non-tech business units, but they work really well if you're willing to sit and talk through them. So if you're not into it to build a game or design something specific like that, chances are there is some level of interesting tech that you can showcase. And I mean, offensive security always sells. If you can show how phishing works in a, albeit very controlled manner, you can start to demonstrate why it's important for them to report this, right? Well, I clicked on something, it didn't do anything. Well, it didn't mean nothing happened. This is what it means under the hood. But if I had to put a very fine point on it, security people, I think if you're willing to do this work and you're willing to come in and educate people, you need to understand how people learn above all else. Take some time, ask your audience, what would make this better? What did you want to see? What would you like to talk about? And practice. It's a numbers game. The more you do it, the easier it gets.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one of the best things you can do is what I call, again, nerd speak, TCP communication, right? Like that whole Synac thing.
It's not UDP. Yeah, I want the feedback.
Right?
But no, I think you're right. So, you know, going into it and understanding, hey, what do you guys expect to get out of this today? What are your goals? And getting some of that up front. What are your questions? And then, like you said, when you're done, saying, hey, what was bad about this? You know, and that's where you can kind of, you know, be a little self-deprecating if you're comfortable with that, right?
That's fair. Yeah, be good to yourself. That is important, right?
Well, right, exactly. You know, but you know, the nerd speak, ha 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 type of thing, right? It didn't anything not land. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Like I said, technical demonstrations. If you have the time and the desire to do it, putting one of those in a presentation, I mean, people like to see that, and especially if you can talk through it and show them like, this is the stuff you don't really see, but I'm going to help you through it. You get a lot of really good questions that way.
Nice.
I'm going to go back to being the devil's advocate again, right? And so thinking as like how MSPs, or at least how I want to, well, not I want to, but thinking about how they operate, right? And so I can't do this at scale, right? I can't, like, I agree with what you're saying. I believe in what you're doing. I love the idea of tabletops. I especially love the idea of, group exercises, team building, social learning. As somebody that's come from I agree with all that. I love everything that you're saying, but I have 100 clients and I can barely keep up with my tickets, let alone anything else.
Right.
Yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, I have a security awareness training platform. I'm going to tick a couple boxes. It's going to roll out. I'm going to set it, forget it, and move on. Because in the MSP mindset, I can't go to all my clients and do tabletops. And as Jesse said, like, I'm going to take 300 people out of this department at $100 an hour for an hour, like, cha-ching, cha-ching. Like, that just doesn't feel like it scales or operationalizes well.
Right. And so from a services provider standpoint, that's where, we always have these questions of, do we do it ourselves or do we outsource? And, managed services providers outsource to people all over the place. We've all worked in organizations where that was the reality that we were in. And in my case, when I set out to build this originally, the way that it was built, the whole supporting systems, I mean, the game, the process, everything about it is, you could replicate it. Right. But gluing it all together certainly takes a lot of time. And I equate it to this question that you might ask a magician. So if you ask an amateur magician how many tricks they know, you're probably going to get 50 to 100 as an answer. If you ask a professional magician how many tricks they know, it's going to be like 6, but they know them really well. And so it became, okay, I'm not going to try to be all things to everything. I'm going to get really good at these few things. And if anybody comes looking for the other stuff, I'm happy to partner with somebody else to just hand it over in a very specific fashion. And that's the way that I built the business, is from start to finish. It moves at the speed of my client security program. So Tim, you mentioned scalability. The hardest part is honestly freeing up my time, because the way that I've built this business is, everything that I do has a layer of automation, streamline, everything behind it. So in essence, a tabletop exercise, what used to take a month to put together, I can now get done in a day with very little effort and still make it in time for a nice long lunch and making dinner at home. Because I leaned all the way into, what does this process have to look like? What is the information that I need? What is required in order to do this well? And then how can I do this at a level that I can take with me that is scalable? So every facet of the business, whether it's invoicing, whether it's doing the sessions, whether it's setting it all up with the clients, it's push button. It's entirely managed by robots, because the core thing I wanted to do was more outcome for less effort. I'm what I call a productive kind of lazy. And as a result, it's allowed me to get very custom, very flexible, very quickly, without actually putting in a lot of my own, massive amount of time. I'm probably the only business owner I know that works as little as I do, because I got really good at all of the stuff that I wanted to get really good at, and just summarily ignored the rest, knowing that I had people in my network that I trusted to handle all of these other components. So some might argue it's leaving money on the table. I'm okay with that, because I'd rather be really good at delivering what I promise, instead of kind of not, worrying about it. Like, yeah, I can kind of do that. I can kind of, but I'd rather give it to somebody that I know and trust, and help grow 2 businesses in my ecosystem instead of just one, while giving the client exactly what they need on all sides. So yeah, how does it scale? I mean, I'm in the process of figuring out a way to clone me to some degree through a facilitator program. The game just has to be a little more packageable first before I put it out there. But yeah, the facilitator program will basically teach you how to do what it is that I do. So if you have a consulting practice and you want to bolt this into your environment, you have your clients, you know them best, you spend your time. But the idea being, okay, well, how do I get you the presentation skills that you need to do it? How do I teach you these systems that make it so that you too can deliver these things? That's next. That's the next thing, then scalable. Yeah, it was about getting this figured out first.
So we are coming down to the wire here, the last few minutes, and one of the things, I just, before we kind of get into like key takeaways and stuff, Jesse, do you have anything like different you want to add, interject before we kind of get into the?
I think, for me, for MSPs looking at this and being like, hey, we want to start adding services like this, it's all about client fit. This is not something, I think, Tim, you were kind of driving at this, that every client's going to want, or every client's going to need, right? So I think this is one of those services or offerings that you can start thinking about to level up into higher profile clients or into more mature clients, or maybe clients that know they need to be mature. So I think, understanding where this fits into your stack is an important piece as you get into that.
Yeah, totally. And it's good that you brought that up, because that is, how do I make this accessible to other businesses where a lot of this isn't there? And I have found that fit, and it has proven to work quite well, both from a business standpoint and just simply from, their security program standpoint. So putting it, again, meeting them kind of where they're at, understanding that, you don't have these foundations, that's no problem. I can show you why they matter, and you can take it from there at that point. But I think the biggest thing to interject with anything training wise inside of a business, this is just global in general. You can apply this to your everyday life. Remember the human, right? Like there's a personal element to everything that we do. And, security is one of those, I think we gravitate towards the technology because it's tangible. We understand it. We can put some code in and it will eventually do what we want it to do. But the human element is arguably one of the most important components, because everything at the base layer is a human element. So in everything that you do in your security program, training, consulting, services delivery, anything that you do, remember the human aspect of it, because that has never steered me wrong. And I think a lot of businesses, when they lean into it, find the same.
Cool. So with 9 minutes left here, we always like to go around the room once and give everybody a minute or so to talk about key takeaways. Let me set this up appropriately. All right. So AJ, key takeaways from today?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the kind of the devil's advocate piece, because if an idea is good and a product is good and a service is good, it needs to be able to stand up to scrutiny like that. Right. And, I felt none of that was off base. And in fact, all of it was music to my ears, because none of that seemed out of left field. All of those were questions that I've either entertained myself or thought of and went, I'd better have an answer for this because somebody's coming to look for it. And in the security space, if we can't scrutinize ideas, tools, concepts, any of that, then we're sort of lost, because the whole point of security is to be skeptical. And it's in that skepticism that, we find evil. It's in that skepticism that we come up with better ideas. So I feel that all of that was very welcome for what that's worth. So don't feel bad about any of that for a second. But again, security ideas, concepts, they should be susceptible to challenge. And that's how you grow and improve them. So you just have to embrace it.
Nice. So, and then, hold on, move you over. Your turn, Jesse.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the takeaway of really trying to facilitate group learning sessions. I think that's something that is applicable in many parts of the business, but I think security is one area where that could be helpful. And so I think taking some of these concepts and building in team exercises, both within your MSP to learn and with your customers to help learn as well. I think that's a really great way to start. And obviously see AJ if you want to use a platform for that.
Exactly. And then where am I? Oh, here I am. So at least for me, a couple of the key takeaways. I liked the idea of like the group exercise, right? I really liked the concept of like that social learning, of bringing everybody together, right? So that was, I really think that that's an important aspect. I'm going to always fall back on different styles and different modals of learning, right? Auditory, kinetic, so on and so forth. And people learn differently. And I think, AJ, you said this, and that is meet them where they are, right? And so as an MSP, meeting your customer where they are mom's bakery with 2 or 3 staff, probably not going to do this kind of level of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that defense contractor that might have 30 or 100 or whatever number of staff, right, that falls into some like deeper level where like that might be a much better fit. And as MSPs, we need to obviously determine ideal customer profile, as Jesse always says, and does this fit into that ICP of that client, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say that do something, start something, because I say that all the time. I'm going to say make sure that whatever you're doing to help educate your clients and educate their end users and getting away from the typical checkbox training into an actual learning and an actual education. So I just did see one last comment. Making tabletop was awesome, fundraising. Yeah, so I just want to make sure we didn't miss a comment. I don't know what we have coming up next week. Usually Tim's talking about that, and I was usually just trying to pull that up and be like, "What is next week?" So, is next week? What is next week? Hold on, Jesse, fill the time while I'm yapping. Privilege.
Oh, now he's on mute.
You muted yourself?
That's
wow,
it.
there you go. So it's either, I think it might be Robert Gillette about selling your vegetables, why practices what you're missing. So I forget. Doesn't matter. Join us next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll have the other Tim back, hopefully, and he'll know what's going on because somebody has to know what the hell's going on because it certainly ain't me. And holidays are coming. Anything else anybody left to add?
No, it was a ton of fun today. AJ's great having you on.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate being a part of this.
Thanks for being on, and we're out.
Subscribe now.